Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for this next session in our event is Corporate Responsibility Key to Sustainability. And our speaker here is Nadia Woodhouse, representing EY Global Centre for Board Matters, and we'll be discussing how to get our leaders on board, so the case for sustainability. So Nadia, can you hear me?
Hi, yes I can, Michael. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
Yeah, well, thanks. Just turned my camera on, so hopefully you'll be able to see me in a moment.
Yeah, we can. Perfect. It looks
Great.
very bright
Hi.
where you are.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully not too bright, and I'll share my screen in a minute so you don't have to look at my face the whole time.
Well, thank you for being here again. And I for one, of looking forward to this session very much so, to take a look at the kind of insights into how we can get our leaders on board, and more so of what EY kind of do to do that.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Michael, and to Youth Time for having me. I'm really, really pleased to be here. As I said, I've got some slides to share, but I just wanted to give you a bit of a brief introduction to myself and to EY as well. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of EY before, but for those who haven't, EY is a professional services organisation. We are here, I guess, to help our clients solve some of the most complex challenges. You might know us as an accounting firm. I feel like we've evolved and grown to be a lot more than that over the last decade or so. We have about 300,000 employees across the globe, so it's quite a large organisation. We're in almost every country. And my role at EY is I'm part of the Global Centre for Board Matters, so I deal with boards of directors. I help to write thought leadership, particularly around how to create long-term value and how to embed sustainability. And I'll talk a little bit more and the crux of my talk about why the board is so crucial in these conversations. I used to work in our climate change and sustainability team, so I feel like that's really my passion area, and I'm delighted to be able to bring those ideas and concepts into the boardroom. And I'm a real advocate for responsible business as well. So that's why I'm very, very happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen with you now, just so you have a little bit of visual aids while I talk you through my presentation. So really today, what I want to talk to you about is a little bit around, obviously corporate social responsibility and sustainability. And I guess the mounting pressures on business as we kind of navigate this new global context that we all live in. And by that I mean COVID, I mean rising inequality, I mean a lot of different societal pressures. I really want to kind of give you this toolkit and give you this information so that this acts as a bit of a toolkit for you when you're considering perhaps making a change in your own organizations, or talking about sustainability or embedding sustainability within your organization. Or maybe you own a business and you want to think about how to do that within your own company. I want to give you a few questions. I won't give you the answers, but I'll give you, it's very cheeky of me, I'll give you a couple of questions to ponder. And I'll also end today's talk just by talking a little bit about EY's journey and the work that we've done around sustainability. When I asked you to join, or when you joined, I asked you a question, and I asked you, what does sustainability mean to you? And thank you very much for some of the answers that are coming through. I'm just flipping over to the poll here. It was really interesting to see how some people talked about what sustainability is around serving stakeholders for the long term. Sustainability means a future without increased restrictions and worry. I feel that really resonates, particularly with young people today. It feels like there is a bit to worry about, and hopefully this toolkit can debunk a little bit of that. Someone said the processes and actions through which humankind avoids the depletion of natural resources in order. That's absolutely right. I think that reminds me of the initial Brundtland definition of sustainability, which was defined in, I think it was 1984, around sort of conserving and preserving a current planetary resources to ensure intergenerational equity, so that there is enough for future generations. So that definitely resonates. I'm just going to go back to my presentation and make it larger for you. So I did ask you the question, yeah, what does sustainability mean to you? It is a bit of a trick question, because it means different things to different people, and to different organizations it will again mean different things. It really depends on stakeholders, and what I want to just bring to light is that sustainability, I guess sometimes in my conversations people think about sustainability just in an environmental sense, and while that's certainly true, I think it is much broader, and our definition of sustainability has widened to make sure that, you know, for one, business sustainability means that an organization will be around for the long term, and I'm talking, you know, 20, 50, 100 years even. So maximizing and looking at that long-term horizon, and to do that, and in any kind of institution, to do that, you do need to look with this kind of long-term lens and kind of shift your focus from just looking at what's in front of you to kind of what's, you know, what is happening out in the distance, and how do we make sure we remain relevant for our stakeholders. So I'm just going to pop up a couple of examples of different stakeholders, and to give you an example of what I mean when I say stakeholders. Obviously the environment is a big stakeholder, a key stakeholder here. Also our customers, people that buy products from businesses. Employees are clearly going to be big stakeholders in any business, especially business like EY, we have so many of them. The broader society and community at large is a stakeholder. You know, and I often think about business leaders and management teams as being a stakeholder as well. And by proxy of that, perhaps the owners of businesses, so shareholders that own shares in the businesses. So I think all of these groups, and there are many more, you can kind of cut these down into, you know, looking at suppliers and looking at broader communities, but all of these stakeholders have something to gain when an organization embarks on a program of sustainability. And particularly business leaders, and I wanted to just focus on this because, again, that's the topic of my conversation today, but business leaders are really starting to feel the pressure. And I pulled out some headlines late last year around why they're feeling the pressure, and I think it's because our young people and our young cohort are becoming a larger percentage of the population. Certainly at EY, millennials and Generation Z make up most of our workforce. In Asia, for example, the Generation Z cohort makes up 24% of the population, and soon we will see the handover of, or the largest wealth transfer in history to that group of people. So family business and wealth going to Generation Z, which means Generation Z are going to make decisions around their businesses, around who they work for, who they invest in, who they buy from, that are aligned with their values. So that's why business leaders are really kind of waking up and paying attention to young people these days. And again, as you can see here, COVID-19 obviously has had a massive impact on young people and job prospects, and climate change really is at the forefront of most of Gen Z's mind. I probably don't need to tell you that. A lot of Gen Zs have been known to prioritize decarbonisation, to buy products from manufacturers that protect the environment and have a sustainable supply chain. I know I do, even though I'm not a Gen Z. Coupled with these issues and focuses from Gen Z is that we are seeing a big gap in inequality. We're seeing a huge, a massive wealth inequality, and I think COVID has only exacerbated this. It's really staggering to me to know that 26 people own as much wealth as the poorest half of the people on the planet. Obviously, you know, we have a climate emergency. We still have, you know, human rights violations through slave labor. We are burning our forests. A lot of things are going to waste. We all kind of know this, but, you know, in the backdrop of COVID and the last 18 months, we're seeing vulnerable communities suffering disproportionately, and there's entrenched disparities across health, wealth, and opportunity. However, at the same time, stock market capitalization, so like the value of companies, have risen, as well as unemployment rates have risen. So these are at record highs during the pandemic. So it suggests that I think some exceptional firms have done well. Some have done well by doing good, but I think many more have a lot more work to do. And so it's my sort of challenge today. And because of this widening inequality, the trust in our different institutions has gone down. So I'm looking here, this is the Edelman Trust Barometer. I think this is a fantastic resource, which takes a snapshot of people and the public and the idea around, you know, trust and trust in institutions, and they look at it every year. So from 2020 to 2021, we've seen that, you know, overall we feel that these institutions are a bit more ethical. Most of them are seen as slightly less competent. So across government, media, and NGOs, or, you know, not-for-profit organizations. And we've seen the handling of the pandemic feels like it's kind of gone backwards a little bit. According to this survey, they surveyed quite a lot of people across the globe. However, business is the only institution that is seen as both now competent and ethical, if you can believe it. So as this has gone up over the last year, there's that spotlight on business leaders to meet the needs of society much more broadly. And there's also a lot higher expectations, I think, on business now as the public looks at organizations to act. So these are some statistics just from our UK peers. You know, the overwhelming majority of the public believes that actually business should have a legal responsibility to the planet and to people, alongside obviously maximizing profits. It's not to say that you have to do one over the other. They believe that business has a responsibility to protect the natural environment, and they believe that capitalism as it currently stands is not really working properly, but they also don't think another, you know, a replacement with another economic system would be beneficial. So kind of what they're saying is that things are a bit broken and there's an opportunity to fix them. I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to B corporations. You'll see the little B circle in the corner of these images. And this is an example, B corporations are kind of an example of businesses that are doing well by doing good. It's a certification for businesses that balance profit and purpose on an equal footing. And I think that it's just one example of movements that have sprung up since the last financial crisis, since 2008, where of businesses that actually believe that, you know, their purpose is not just to maximize shareholder value, even though that should be, you know, one of the core tenets of business, but that also they can balance social impact, environmental impact, and actually creating products and services that benefit society, rather than sort of making up for it later. And that's sort of where we get into the conversation around CSR and sustainability. So some of the B Corps you might recognize, maybe a Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's. Some of the brands are owned by Unilever and Danone, like Pocket Teas, for example. These are consumer-facing B Corps, which are really just sort of taking the challenge of, you know, having business as a force for good in society as head on. So if you ever want to feel inspired, I just wanted to give a shout out to B corporations, because they're a new type of business, which is really amazing. But back to sort of, you know, mainstream and large business, maybe you're aware of the Business Roundtable. It was, they're in the US, but it's comprised of 181 companies or CEOs of these largest companies within the USA, which are generally multinationals. You've heard of many of them before, but you know, this mounting pressure that I have been explaining before has led this group of very powerful CEOs to recreate the statement on what is the purpose of a corporation. They basically said it's not just to maximize profits and make heaps of money. It's about ensuring that they serve their stakeholders. So leading their companies for the benefit of all stakeholders, including customers, including employees, suppliers, communities, as well as shareholders. And it indicated that business has a broader role to play in society. I think it is a really good first step. I mean, this was 18 months ago, and then of course the pandemic occurred, and so a lot of priorities had to be shifted. What I do want to focus on, though, is that there are organizations that have done well by doing good. So again, this statement was a really solid indication to the market that we are moving as a business community towards a more inclusive and sustainable capitalism. But the pandemic is really accelerating demands for new ways of doing business to create value, I guess, for shareholders over the long term. And when I say long term, as I mentioned earlier, I'm talking more about kind of 10, 20, 50 years. And this is where I think that the board has an incredibly important role to play. I show this picture. I really like this picture. It is from one of the B Corps I mentioned. It's called Innocent Drinks, actually owned by Coca-Cola now. But they sometimes put this picture up to demonstrate kind of what their boardroom kind of looks like. You know, there's seats all around the table for board members, but there's always a seat at the table for the environment and for society, which I really think this image is quite powerful. And just to give you a sense of, I mean, what is a board of directors, and I'll talk about it at a very high level, general sense, but a board is a group of individuals that are not part of the everyday operations of an organization. They're not part of sort of executive management. They are a group of usually very experienced people that are elected by the shareholders or the owners of the company. And they act on behalf of shareholders and owners to ensure that the organization fulfills its mission and purpose. Importantly, they also appoint the CEO of any organization. So the CEO does report to the boardroom. And really their focus is on guiding the organization, not in the day-to-day management. And I think that's important because, as I mentioned before, the pandemic kind of threw up a lot of challenges over the last year now. It's pretty much a year since we were in lockdown. And, you know, senior executives and the CEO and the leadership team really needed to double down and focus on guiding their organizations through COVID and helping them to stay resilient throughout the pandemic. While the board, I think the responsibility, even though they are also ensuring that, you know, their organizations stay resilient, the board has this long-term view. Usually board members stay on the board for longer than the CEO stays in their position. So a CEO, she might be there for maybe 3, 5, 7 years. Sometimes the board's tenure is, you know, 5 to 10 years. It really depends, but in general, board members have a longer term view of their organization. Board members are accountable to all their stakeholders, and one of the key stakeholders is investors, the investor community, which I guess you could say represents all the shareholders. And I just wanted to give you a bit of an example of how the board can really be held accountable. Particularly recently as ESG investing has grown in popularity. So you might have heard of ESG investing before. ESG stands for environment, social and governance investing. And a lot of investors now are looking at the metrics that companies report around these key issues and key areas as a way of determining company performance and value. And just to highlight one of these, you know, sort of the power that investors have, you know, this is an issue quite close to home in my home country in Australia, but recently the CEO of a mining company, Rio Tinto, was actually forced out by shareholders or investors after the public discovered that even though they were delivering really solid profits and maximizing shareholder value, they actually had, the mining company actually destroyed an ancient Aboriginal site in Australia, which was really, really obviously crucially important to our heritage. But it just shows that sort of these social issues can really come to the forefront, and that investors and shareholders really care about these things. So the board then obviously had to appoint a new CEO, and so you're really seeing board members be thrown into the spotlight these days. Back to the Edelman Trust Barometer, I really love their stats, but this is sort of, you know, where the public really believes that business is expected to fill the void left by government and left by other institutions. So basically what I was saying before is that we believe businesses are competent and ethical. We trust them a little bit more than we trust other organizations, but we also expect them to do something. Most of you see here, 68% of CEOs should step in when the government doesn't fix societal problems. They should take the lead on change rather than waiting for government to say, like, create regulation, which we know regulation can take a long time. And so we want businesses to actually lead by example rather than just be leading through compliance. And that CEOs actually should hold themselves quite accountable to the public, the broader public. So they're becoming much more central figures in the spotlight. And just to kind of bring us back to the current crisis and the pandemic, I mean, there are some CEOs and some boards that are really leading by example. One of them is a supermarket chain here in the UK where I live. And they really saw the pandemic as an imperative to bring their brand purpose to life and to prioritize the needs of their stakeholders. And rather than thinking about prices during the last 12 months, they actually just prioritized keeping their people safe and making sure that the communities in which they operate had enough food so that, you know, the supermarket shelves were, you know, stayed full. And they used to have a very standard decision-making process, and they threw that all out the window for a more kind of empathetic and human design and human-led approach. And while these might not seem very tangible things, that same retailer saw their profits go up by 30% in the last 12 months. So it's sort of this demonstration that you can do well and you can do good. You can do well by doing good is what I mean. And another food company that I know of as well has actually kept its stakeholders front of mind. And I think this one is really demonstrating that you can put your money where your mouth is. But the CEO actually went to the board and said, I should take a pay cut this year because I don't need as much money as you're paying me. And the board accepted that, and they also didn't receive any payment for their work this year in the pandemic, so they could bring back the profits to focus on their sustainability strategy and focus on the sustainable development goals, and I'll talk a little bit more about those, but focus on the SDGs that they had committed to over the last 12 months. So again, this sort of shows where the board steps in and takes the lead here, and I think they are really good short-term examples, but what we really want to focus on as well is how the board can act in the long term for long-term sustainability. And this is just an example of some of the research that has been done into boards and sustainability. What's promising to note is that there is an increase in the number of sustainability board committees. So that means a subset of the board is meeting regularly to talk about sustainability issues, which is great. It means that it's not just sitting in middle management, that it's elevated to the most strategic level of the organization. So this is across the top 100 largest public companies. And also that not only have we got more committees, but we've got more directors sitting on those committees. So the size, but also the volume and the breadth of people focused on sustainability at the highest level is increasing. And we also see directors, company directors, increasing their credentials and their level of skill sets around sustainability, particularly around climate change, because it's such a complex, wicked problem that we face here. So it's really encouraging, I think, to note that sustainability issues are now firmly implanted on most board agendas, you know, over the past few years. I really like this next slide that I'm showing you. It's a recent report from Bloomberg NEF, and it shows that while this is not a causation, there's certainly a correlation of greater diversity, and they looked at sort of women on boards in this case, but when there's more than 30% women on boards, and we have a strong correlation with good climate governance and performance and innovation around climate change as well. And I think that just goes to, to demonstrate that the broader perspectives you have across different diversity, and I fundamentally believe that also age diversity, background, ethnicity, and gender has a role to play here. The more diverse perspectives you can get, then the more innovative solutions we will find to some of these, pressing problems. I think this is particularly important because this week we celebrated International Women's Day in March, but it just hits home a little bit that there is a lot of work to do. There's a saying in the board community, and I think, well, the people that work with the board community, that traditionally boards have been known as pale, male, and stale. It is a funny word, but saying, but it is true. A lot of traditionally board members you'll see are much older white males, and while that has traditionally been the case, I see that changing a lot, and I think that's really important for also getting diverse perspectives around sustainability, but also around the issues that different people across society face. So just to bring us back to kind of the context, I think that we are moving now from a focus really on shareholder value. I fundamentally believe that shareholder primacy, the fact that you just have to maximize profit, is irrelevant now. It's not just the only thing that you need to do. It has created a great cost to the planet and to society, and business leaders recognize that now, or most leaders do. And we are shifting over now to the 21st century, creating stakeholder value for all stakeholders. And we really can transform the role of business and society to serve all stakeholders. And it actually is good for business, given some of the examples I showed you a little bit earlier. We are evolving capitalism, and I think the old rules kind of don't apply anymore. And what I keep saying is that you can do well by doing good. And I will caveat that though. I will caveat that by saying that it's not just about kind of doing good in little pockets or doing good where it feels good. It has to be quite strategic and aligned with your business goals. I will get into that in a minute. But one last slide from Edelman. I really also like this slide, which is that, this kind of a little bit about our empowerment now that, the public really believe that consumers and employees have the power to force corporations to change, right? We vote with our wallet. We buy products that we believe in when we can afford them, right? We work for companies, hopefully, we want to work for companies that have values that are aligned with ours. And especially, I think the stat on the right is quite telling that, in 2021, people that have a job are more likely now to voice their objections or to engage in a protest or even just to raise their concerns compared to a year ago. And I think that has manifested because of a lot of the unrest that has happened over the last year, and especially in response to the tragic killing of George Floyd. I think a lot of people, they really expected their organizations to step up and have a say. A slide I showed you a little bit earlier talked about how we really believe that CEOs need to have a say on these issues, that they can't just stick to the remit of what their company is all about, that we expect in business to play a deep role in society. And I think some of the companies that are on the vanguard of sustainability are really vocal in issues such as, racism, equal rights for LGBTQIA, climate change. We saw the Me Too movement. There is an undercurrent, I suppose, of social change, and we're, particularly now that we're at home, we're blurring the lines between our personal and our business lives, and we're bringing more of ourselves to work, hopefully, through shared experiences. And employees are no longer kind of happy to see their employers just, avoid taking responsibility for issues like plastic or pollution or modern slavery, or, supply chains that aren't transparent. I think most millennials, well, actually, there's a stat that 3/4 of 18 to 34-year-olds, which is actually dominating our workforce, not only at EY, but across the globe, they say they expect their employer to actually take a stand. So not even to be neutral, but to take a stand one way or another on important issues that face their country and their rights. We're also seeing those consumers, again, take up the cause, and they expect those companies to take a stand on social and environmental issues. There was a case where, Burger King created the Impossible Whopper, which featured a vegan patty with 1/10 of the carbon footprint of beef, and then McDonald's, followed quite soon after with its own McPlant burger, which is good to have that kind of healthy competition, I think. In January, General Motors pledged to sell only zero-emission vehicles by 2035, which is huge. And an airline in the US, United, they committed to reducing 100% of their greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, which for an airline is pretty big as well. So these are consumer-type companies that are increasingly matching, I think, their values of their customers in order to survive. So it really is a business imperative now. So we're more likely to have a voice. And here I wanted to sort of transition to talk about kind of what that voice looks like and how we can have our voice heard. And I mentioned before that it's really important to think about this in a strategic way. I think that there is one school of thought that obviously we should and can have a voice on social issues. But I think to be heard as well, we need to take into account the context of our organizations. And I appreciate this slide has a lot of different colored bubbles on it. It's a recent report that came out from EY actually this week called the CEO Imperative. And they surveyed, I think it was 500 CEOs of the largest organizations across the world. And they asked them about kind of where they are going to focus on in the next, I think it was 3 years, in order to drive growth. Because I think if you're going to focus on, projects and sustainability issues that are important to you, they also need to be important to the CEO and to the leadership team. And so you can see here, we've kind of broken this down by sector, that overwhelmingly digital is going to be a huge area to drive growth and getting people into the digital world. So for an example, consumer, we buy things totally online now. That means that we have more complex supply chains, which potentially could mean we have more environmental impact. So that's if you're in the consumer business. And for example, if you look down the right-hand side, down the bottom, the energy sector is obviously very concerned with climate risk and how they transition to the renewables sector. And so these are kind of like the major disruptors coming down the line. I think it's highly relevant to a successful business case around sustainability to say, well, what does my company care about? And I know this is sort of an aggregate, but it's a good place to start. Otherwise, I think, any kind of project that we care about as a social issue or an environmental issue, if it's not linked to, or if you can't find the link to the organizational strategy, then there's a risk that perhaps it is a project for 1 or 2 years, but then with a change of leadership, that the focus on that changes with the change of leadership. But if you can demonstrate that it's embedded into your company's mission and strategy, then I think that can be also quite helpful. And again, this is where the board comes in. I mentioned that the board of directors has a longer tenure or a longer, they often stay on the board for longer than a CEO stays in their position. And so they will also be looking to these kind of long-term strategies as well. And this idea of purpose and mission is really at the core, and I think it's really helpful as well to kind of reflect back on your own organization's purpose, if you will, when thinking about, well, what is the change that I want to create, or where are the the opportunities for us to be more sustainable. Google's stated purpose is to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. I didn't know they had that purpose before I did this presentation, so that's really cool. They're known as well to bring health through food to as many people as possible. I feel like that's something we could really get behind. Novartis particularly important now to reimagine medicine, improving and extending people's lives. And then of course, EY, my own company's purpose to build a better working world, which again, because we work with businesses, we want to understand how businesses can work better, how they can be more trustworthy, how we can be more competent, more ethical, much like the Edelman Barometer was talking about. I was also at EY when this was not our purpose. We had a very different purpose. The old purpose was quality in everything we do, which is still laudable, but I really feel like this new purpose, which we've had since 2014, very much resonates with young people. And so I guess this concept of purpose is more and more on the minds of business leaders. You see a lot of organizations either developing their purpose or restating what their new mission or purpose is. And often you won't see anything about shareholder value or maximizing profits in these purposes. These are more about, well, what does society care about today, and what are we really on this planet to do? And I think we're seeing a return to the role of business and why we set up business in the first place. And I'm talking about way long time ago, around the Industrial Revolution. Really, the idea of an organization or a business was to find the most effective use of capital to solve a problem. So, we wanted to distribute electricity. We had to find the best way of using the money that we had, and the best way to do that is through a structure of a corporation. I feel like sometimes we're returning to that. What is the problem that needs to be solved in society? And this will help guarantee the longevity of an organization as well, because as society shifts and as society evolves, so too can the organizations. It is kind of like an aspirational reason for being, how do we apply our core competencies, and in EY's case, as a service organization, how do we serve the world doing that, and how do we make profit? Because if we don't make profit, we won't be around to serve that purpose anymore. So you'll see this kind of purpose focused a lot more by leaders now. There's a lot of conversations going on about this. And again, my challenge, I think, to you is to think about, well, what is the purpose of our organization, and how can I fully embed change within that? So this is like my toolkit of questions for you around perhaps some things to think about as you start to understand what it is that you care about, and what change you can create, if any. Perhaps your organization is already doing a fantastic job, but certainly I think for many businesses there's definitely a lot more to do. So my questions are, what does my organization care about? Does it have a purpose or a mission statement? Also, what is its strategy? So look in annual reports if it's a public company, or listen to the CEO when they speak and understand, what are we trying to do? What is our ambition for the next 5 years? And how does that relate to kind of the world and the society that we live in right now? Does my organization have a purpose that is stated, that is, broader than just maximizing profits? Also, what does my organization's stakeholders care about? If I'm a manufacturing company, what do the consumers care about? Do they care about reducing packaging? Do they care about end of life, returning products at the end of their useful life and making sure they're disposed of properly? Do they care about serving the societies that they operate in? If you're a supermarket, how can you serve your local societies, making sure that they have enough resources and the shelves are stocked? And then I think a really important kind of bubble in this Venn diagram is, well, what do I care about? What is going to give me energy and passion in my everyday? And it's not that you have to be a sustainability expert or an expert in the area that you care about. It's really about what am I going to be driven to do, and it doesn't have to relate to perhaps your day-to-day job. It's helpful if it does, but it's not necessary. And then what's really important to think about is who in the organization might be working on the idea already. You'll find that, if you find your tribe and you find people that are like you and that care about the same things as you, you'll end up, doing these things on the side of your desk and have kind of secret working groups, and it can be a really great way to connect with other people. And also think about what channels are there already existing within the organization to have your voice heard. Are there town halls? Are there pulse surveys? Are there different types of mechanisms that the leadership creates to listen to its people? We're seeing, again, as I mentioned, we're seeing so much uptick in employee activism that senior leaders are starting to listen to people, especially young people, because they realize they need to adapt their organizations to really be relevant to the youth area. So again, just a reminder to stick with your passion area. I wanted to just end for the next few minutes to bring it back to sort of EY and kind of what we're doing, just to give you an example of, the journey that we're on in embedding sustainability and our corporate responsibility program. I think we have an excellent CSR program. I think sustainability as a broader concept we're starting the journey, but it's really great that we have started it with an ambition to be net zero by 2025, which is awesome. And that we will actually be carbon negative this year, which means we'll take out more carbon from the atmosphere than we put in, so through offsets. That's been easier than most years because we have most of our greenhouse gases come from travel and our offices. Even though we still have our offices, we're not traveling at all. So we've kind of reduced that environmental impact a lot from the pandemic. But what will be interesting is how we can maintain that commitment and continue to be net zero in 2025, when obviously, hopefully, business is starting to go back to not to normal, but a new way of doing business. And I'm sure we'll be flying again in some way, shape, or form. And so that's sort of our, environmental ambition. I think what the bigger challenge for us as well is how to make sure that we, through our services and through the work that we do, that we promote sustainable solutions. That can be hard depending on who our clients are, as well as the types of work that we do. But it's something that we're committed to and that we're working on, and I'm really excited to kind of see what we come up with there. And then finally, our corporate responsibility program, EY Ripples. I am also equally excited about this program. It's been around for the last 2 years, so it's pretty new. As I mentioned before, we have 300,000 people across EY. When I started at EY, almost 14 years ago now, as I said, we had a very different mission statement, and we had a very piecemeal program to, philanthropy and to corporate social responsibility. When I started in the Australian office, we had a couple of volunteering days, and it was sort of based on maybe team building events, and some people would go and volunteer at the local charity. And I think that's all super relevant and super important, and still actually we maintain that to this day. But we've also developed a program called EY Ripples, which kind of brings together all of our social impact work across EY, under one shared vision, which is actually the idea is that we want to mobilize 1 million people across EY. We don't even have 1 million people, but by 2030, we want to mobilize 1 million people across EY, plus across our wider networks, to positively affect the lives of 250 million by 2025 and 1 billion by 2030. So that's pretty lofty goals. And I'll explain a little bit about how we're going to do that. But essentially, these are the issues that we care about. We understand that many people live in extreme poverty due to climate change. We also understand the impact that digital and automation is having on people. We see that across our clients. So a lot of jobs will be transitioned or lost because of automation. And so we're really focusing on upskilling the next generation of people to make sure that they have other skills that won't be taken over by automation. And by 2030, a lot of people will be living in developing countries, 7.2 billion. And so I mentioned that I would talk about the UN SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. I think these are really relevant because if you know sort of about the 17 SDGs, they are there to mobilize business and the community to work towards the 17 key biggest sort of opportunities and challenges we have for eliminating inequality and poverty by 2030. It is again a lofty goal, but what we've tried to do is match the work that we do to the SDGs, and we try to measure our impact based on the SDGs that we can have an impact on. And so I mentioned earlier that our old strategy was, one of piecemeal volunteering, which is still absolutely important. But what we have created now is 3 areas of focus so that we can send our people on 6-week secondments, so 6-week projects, to help companies and businesses that can't afford our services normally, but that need it most. And they work across these 3 areas. So the next generation workforce, so young people and underserved people, to develop the skills. We work with impact entrepreneurs, so people that are working on small and scale growing businesses that actually have a mission to align to the Sustainable Development Goals. And then accelerating environmental sustainability, so environmental projects, both internally and externally. I won't go through all of these because probably I want to leave some time for questions as well. But essentially, these are some of the examples of the work that we do across the world, and this is not limited to just where we have our offices, but it's really based on the needs of local communities. We send EY people out to work with organizations like Junior Achievement to upskill young people. We do student mentoring programs across our impact entrepreneurs. We work with sanitation, which is a really big issue which we need to focus on in developing countries, as well as upskilling women across the Middle East and then across the job market. These are just examples. And equally around environmental sustainability, as I mentioned, we look at internal projects around office plastics reduction. We also do a lot of sort of on the ground Earthwatch type projects as well, which is great. And I really think that this is a really smart way of using the tools and the skills that people at EY have, who are usually pretty business savvy, can solve problems. We solve a lot of problems for our clients. We can also help these organizations with their issues and the issues that they're facing. We really feel, I think, that we have a responsibility to use those skills in the best way possible. And I think that the Ripples program has just been a great example, I suppose, of how we can better put to use our skills while still aligning it with our business strategy. And I think it has really helped in making sure that, employees who are really essential stakeholder to us, because we have so many of them, it's really helped with our employee engagement and helping people feel like they have a purpose, and that EY, that their values are matched to EY's broader purpose as well. So I've talked a lot. I'm going to finish with the questions again, because I think these are helpful to just pique your interest in terms of having a bit of self-reflection and internal reflection around, well, what is it that I can do and how can I be empowered to make a change? And I'm again really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about this subject area and this passion area. And I know that I'm surrounded by many other fantastic speakers, which I've enjoyed listening to. So I'll stop sharing my screen and put myself back on video and give you a chance to ask any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nadia, for that. It was really insightful, and it's kind of amazing the work that EY really do, and the fact that you are linked to a lot of businesses where you go in there actually help them. You doing it yourself, leading by example, is really great to see. Kind of with that though, I have a question which is more to do with the work you do with those businesses. So for example, EY being net zero by 2025 and carbon negative by the end of this year is like amazing. Most of the plans we tend to hear about other businesses are usually 10, 20-year plans on. So are you getting a number of businesses really embracing your services to help do similar by you helping create sustainable initiatives with them? Or are you finding a lot more kind of apprehension, I suppose, for businesses to really kind of change their models to embrace this kind of sustainable mindset?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that our clients are all very, very different. They fall into different camps. We have developed, I guess, an ambition to help organizations where necessary meet similar goals, and maybe it's not 2025, maybe it's sort of net zero by 2030. We have a group of, I think it's more than 1,000 people that with my old team that I was part of the climate change and sustainability team, that work on these particular types of projects all the time. And I think, as I mentioned before, I think one of the key challenges is going to be encouraging and advocating for these types of transitions. And I think, again, the way we approach that is through sort of a strategic lens, which is, you know, we're here to be business advisors. If you want to be sustainable and successful in the long term, we understand that, you know, and hopefully you understand that having either a sustainability strategy or thinking about, you know, your long-term plans, which will involve some of society's greatest challenges, is going to come to light. So that's a conversation, I think, you know, and because I've been in this space for a long time, you know, I used to have to get into an elevator back when we could go into work and explain, you know, what climate change was. And now it's very different conversation. You know, everybody is thinking and talking, especially within the organization, about sustainability. So I don't see a lot of pushback. I mean, I don't know all of our clients necessarily, but I think there will be a tail of organizations that will have to follow the example of some of the leading companies as well. So I think it is a bit of both, but I am pretty positive and optimistic for the future.
Yeah, hopefully they all kind of take a leaf out your book continuously, and there's never any pushback. That'll be the best thing. I suppose if we look at the root of that, so you mentioned that EY's purpose originally was stated to be changed from quality in what you do to instead build a better working world. What kind of caused that change, and is it something which can be replicated in other businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question. The change came about with we brought in a new CEO, and often you know, and that's quite normal to have a new CEO, as I mentioned, every kind of 4 to 8 years, kind of like a presidential term in a way. But we brought in a new CEO that I think was very focused on sort of young people and kind of how the world was transitioning, and realized that the old purpose statement didn't resonate anymore. I think it was, you know, it was important in the days of, you know, EY being known as a accounting and an audit firm, you know, to ensure trust in capital markets. But over time, I think, you know, that is just one pillar of good governance and good business and a good functioning society. And I think they kind of foresaw the trends of the fact that, you know, we need to care a lot more about our people. We need to care about how society is like interlinked and how we work with other businesses as well. And that we're just one piece of the puzzle. And so we have an opportunity to sort of make a stand around creating sort of this better working world. And I think it can be seen in two ways. You know, it can be seen as, you know, creating a better functioning world for business, but it can also be seen as creating a better world for businesses to thrive in and for people to thrive in as well. And I think the latter is really being embraced internally. And what I would say is that CEO actually retired, and we have a new CEO who didn't change our purpose because we realized how well it resonated. And he's been in the role for the last 3 years, I think, and has really just embraced that and built on it and evolved it over time. such that we now have these net zero commitments, and we have the Ripples programs. There's some really tangible examples of keeping that spirit alive.
Yeah, and that Ripples program you've kind of mentioned really shows off that CSR really isn't just about donations. There is so many different ways you can implement CSR, and giving away your services shows also that any size company, it doesn't matter what size company you are, you can contribute in some sort of manner of a CSR project just by donating your services and time, really. Anything from small to something big. It's not about money, it's about how you can kind of work together in that environment. Speaking of working together, so just got time to take a couple more questions. So if anyone else is able to write some questions down, feel free to do so. If we run out of time, then they will be there attached to the session. So hopefully, Nadia, if you can find time, you'll be able to answer them later on. But with that, with bringing people together, you mentioned about a diverse board kind of brings better perspectives. So you have a lot of kind of initiatives which are going around where people are trying to force upon diversity in workplaces. So they say it kind of comes across that you kind of need to meet quotas of how many people from certain backgrounds. I think it's a good thing, because obviously you want to bring diversity to a workforce. It's just when you force upon it, it doesn't really change the mindset of a lot of people. So how would you go about changing the mindset instead of just trying to do these initiatives to force the change, to create that diverse board?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's a sort of that age-old question, particularly around Women's Day and women on boards, you know, sort of saying you need to have a minimum of 50% or a minimum of 30%. I think you're right. Quotas go there's sort of one step or one part of the puzzle, and you almost need them initially to kind of force people to improve the pipeline of young people and sort of middle management going through a process to get up to a board. Because if you don't say, like, I need to meet this minimum quota at the end of the day, all of the programs and all of the projects that are required to increase the pipeline of diverse talent will probably not happen. So it's almost like you know, a key unlocking the door. But you know, after some time, and I think that the Nordics have done really well with their quotas, but they're also recognizing, you know, in those countries that over some time that it can't just be quota based, that it has to be merit based, and that, you know, once you reach a critical mass and once you reach that culture shift, that quotas then become a little less relevant. But it's almost like one part of the journey. So I am kind of torn, because I do believe that they play a role in forcing people to look at what the diversity balance is, but it's not the answer for sure. There needs to be embedded learning and embedded focus and mentoring of young people to get to that point where we don't need a quota, to get to that point where we have a diverse and representative sample of population in which to take our leadership from.
I think that's the biggest trouble of everything at the moment, really, and it's trying to embed that change instead of it being forced upon. It's trying to embed it, and then everything comes together in that manner. So I really commend what you're doing at EY, where you're trying to develop those sustainable ideas in all the consultancy work you do, which is really great to hear, instead of it being leading with money, which is how the world has kind of been seen for the last 20, 30 years at least. It's been focused on that instead. So it's nice to see that the change is coming in, that viewpoint is going somewhere different. So we just have the last couple of questions. So there's one written here on there, I don't know if you can see it, which was written just before the session started. I think it's really relevant to the whole event and our audience, which is what strategies are leaders coming up with to ensure there is more involvement of youth? So that would be the new change coming through, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a strategy or actually being forced by virtue of most of our workforce is now classified as youth. You know, most of our workforce is under 34. I think a couple of things that EY does well is, you know, big internship programs. I mean, they're available in every country. We have also, and this isn't relevant to youth, it's relevant to everybody, but we were one of the first professional firms to get rid of the requirement to have a university degree to get a job. So, you know, younger people, but also people that have taken a different life path, we've been able, you know, we've sort of said, well, you know, experience is more important than a piece of paper. for certain roles as well. I think that I see our current CEO spending a lot of time with the younger people, because for him, as I understand it, he talks to these younger people to really get a finger on the pulse of what the issues are and what people care about as well. And that's really of his own personal volition. But we have a lot of, pulse surveys and, the sort of standard channels in which people can voice their issues. I think there's still work to do. I think as our Ripples program develops and we do more projects with youth organizations, and we feed back to EY and we feed back to the leadership what we're seeing on the ground, like, how I mentioned how a lot of automation is going to take place, and a lot of the skills that we have, even I have, won't be relevant in the future. That will help inform our strategies going forward as well. So I really like that as not only CSR, but it's a bit of a test case and a little bit of insight for our future strategy as well. So there are a couple of different channels. And I think the biggest one is the fact that we employ a lot of youth, so we do have to listen to them. We do have to meet their needs, otherwise they will leave. And luckily we're seen as an employer of choice, but it's only because we just spend so much time listening on the ground. We don't do it perfectly, I know that for sure. I don't know any organization that does, but it does really start with listening, authentically listening as well.
Well, it's really good to hear that you're embracing that diversity culture, that you understand that there's people from loads of different mindsets, raised in different ways, so different age groups, and they all have different opinions, and find out what's really going on. I think the stereotypical side of the corporations used to be people who are of a certain age, and you have the phrase of being stuck in their ways. So it's nice to know that that's starting to change massively, and you're kind of leading the way there, I suppose. Just as a last one is, I know that you attended earlier session with Susanna from Samsung, and there was a question which was raised, and I kind of want to throw the question to you for your opinion as well, which is about companies, how they show off what they do for CSR. So instead of being able to look at it as they're showing off as advertisement, come and buy our products because we do something good, instead showing it off by really promoting their image of what they're about and spreading that kind of influence. Do you have any kind of idea of how you can create that separation and techniques or anything you think could do to do that?
Yeah, I actually think our biggest brand ambassadors are the people that work for EY, because we're not a consumer products company like Samsung. So we don't have a physical, tangible product, and we don't have a lot of marketing to the wider consumer population around who we are. I mean, the average person on the street probably wouldn't have heard of EY, but much, compared to Samsung, for example. So our marketing and the work that we do really is targeted towards clients, so other big business. And we do a lot of marketing there. We do, create a lot of articles and content. I think some of the work that we do around research and making sure that we are creating research that is freely and publicly available as well is really helpful to the business conversation. And I think, as I said, the best way that we can do, kind of communicate our impact is through the people, the 300,000 mouthpieces that work for EY. And if they have an exceptional experience and they really fundamentally believe in the brand, which goes back to having a, values and strategy that we can all believe in, then we will be the ones that will help to advocate for the brand and attract new people and talent. And hopefully maybe I've been able to talk, about us. We're not perfect, but it is a really great place to work, and we win lots of awards to do that. So I think it's about demonstrating it through action rather than, constantly kind of putting out the story. The story is still important. We have to communicate that, because otherwise people won't know. But it's about, if you meet someone who works at EY, they tell you that it's quite exceptional. Hopefully most of them would. And I think that is more authentic than, any kind of marketing piece that you can put out.
Yeah, I think Susanna mentioned similar, where it's a case of the focus really be on that word of mouth. And so you have people who are really kind of positive and they want to share that word. They will share that word, which gives another excuse to really spend time switching off your TV from the adverts and actually talking to people.
Yeah.
share that.
Totally.
Thank you again for doing this for us, Nadia.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thanks for all the great work you do. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.